What's up guys, and welcome back. Today in this video we're going to be discussing Castle Rock episode 9 titled Henry Deaver. Now obviously this is a bit of a departure from my last videos. One, I'm filming outside, and two, I normally watch these in the morning before I go to work, and I just could not find this episode at all until I finished work, which was like an hour ago. So I'm filming this as soon as the episode ended, so I'm trying to get my head around everything that happened in the episode and try and get it out as concisely and less confusing for you to listen to. So the episode begins with a voiceover monologue, which I wasn't too sure who that was in the first place, but turned out to be Matthew Deaver talking about all of the horrific events that have happened in Castle Rock over the years. And this is also displayed with numerous scenes. There's like a helicopter that's crashed and there's smoke everywhere, and then we see a school bus get T-boned by a train, which was pretty awesome but probably horrific to actually see. Matthew talks about his childhood and how his mother actually tried to kill him, and she told him the tale of how she killed him but he came back to life, so he was resurrected. Now I'm not sure if this was just how she told the story, if she just didn't finish the job, or if he was a miraculous baby that came back to life. Surely if he is a miraculous baby, then that has something to do with his significance in the story. And with him hearing the voices of the schism over all of these years, he finally heard the actual voice which gave him the message to start building the cage from the basement, which I'll get to a little bit later. We flash forward to what we presume is present day, and we see Bill Skarsgård's character running, and it looks like he's running from the police, but we actually see he's wearing sneakers. So this is a completely different side of the character that we've not seen before, and he's in a completely different city as well. He's not in Castle Rock. He looks like he's in New York or Chicago or something along those lines. So this is a theory that we've all talked about over the last 8 episodes, about this being like an alternative reality or Henry from a different world, and the way the schism works with it being different nows and thens definitely adds to that theory. But now we have a solid confirmation that this is Henry Deaver from a different world. A lot of people have been getting pissed off with me calling him Nick or instead of the boy, but now we can just call him Henry Deaver. But now we have to decide whether to call him Henry Deaver 1 or 2. We don't really find out that it's Henry Deaver for quite some time in the episode, but there's a lot of things alluding to it. The fact that the character has a cat called Puck, which I'm pretty sure was the name for Henry Deaver in the original timelines pet dog, and I just guessed it pretty this is the situation that we're going to be getting into. And when he sees Molly, she still recognizes him from her childhood in this reality, so they're still childhood friends, and that's when we get the name drop that he is Henry Deaver. And if you think about it, one of the first things he ever says in the show is when he's asked his name by the police officers, is that he says Henry Deaver, and that was right there in front of our eyes in the first episode. So for the most of this video I'm going to be talking about Henry Deaver as in Bill Skarsgård character, and he's given a call by Alan Pangborn telling him that something happened with Matthew. So in this timeline, Matthew Deaver is still alive up until this point. And what we do find out when he arrives in Castle Rock is that Matthew Deaver has actually just committed suicide, but 27 years later in this timeline compared to when he died back in 1991 in the original timeline. That's what I loved about this episode, is just the subtle differences of things that happen in these different timelines and how they affected the characters throughout these two timelines where the characters are intertwined. One constant between the two timelines is that Ruth Deaver is still suffering with Alzheimer's or dementia. So throughout all of these timelines, that seems to be a constant with her. And I'm not sure if that makes her like a superhuman, if that's her special ability, that she can phase through all of these timelines rather than it just being like a horrible thing that happens to her. We realise that the differences between these two families is that Alan and Ruth decided to run away from Henry instead of Ruth staying and being just given this really shitty life with Matthew Deaver up until 1991. So in this current timeline with Bill Skarsgård being Henry Deaver, he has lived for maybe 27 years without his wife or his son, and he's been out there working on the schisma, which is another thing that I thought was really interesting, the way that he had built himself the soundproof room, which in the other timeline they said that he never had time to build because he died, but in this one he did, and it's been there for so long it's all left and it's like all fallen to pieces and mouldy out in the woods. I like how they made a point that some things are destiny and some things are going to happen in both timelines no matter what. So it seems the way that Matthew Deaver went out in this timeline is that he actually committed suicide with the gun, which is what he was going to do if they left him in the original timeline anyway. So I guess destiny just took its own way, and that's what happened when they left him. He was going to do it anyway, but that change is what drove him to it eventually in present day, which I assume is 2018. So the character of Molly is very different in this one. She still seems like she does have the shining powers, but not quite as tuned in as they are in the original timeline. But she doesn't seem to be taking medication for the anxiety, and she seems to have a much more prolific job. I think she's actually like a part of the council, and she's like the chairman of the board or something, so she has some sway in the town of Castle Rock. which is safe to assume happened because she didn't kill a guy when she was like 10. So the character of Henry Deaver, played by Bill Skarsgård, in this one is completely different to what we've seen. He was been completely silent most of the season and really timid, and for all reasons he's been locked up for 27 years. So in this one, when we get to see him being like giving speeches about Alzheimer's to a whole board of people, and he's got a girlfriend who he's hoping to have a child with, he still has a bit of a creepy look about him when he smiles and stuff, but overall he's such a different character. He's just like a normal guy. You kind of root for this guy as a main character, which would have been awesome if he was actually a main character instead of the other Henry Deaver. Henry finds a shit ton of cassette tapes from like the 80s, 90s, I don't know how long they're from there, but they are basically discussing all of the horrible events that have happened over the course of history in Castle Rock, going back to the 1400s, and this is where he learns about the event where the Henry Deaver from the original timeline crossed over the schisma into his timeline. And this was really interesting because we got like the sense that Matthew Deaver had lost his wife and son, and he had a chance to reclaim this new son with the new Henry Deaver who came into his life, but instead he decided that this was like deceit and a lie. And who could have blamed him, really, of being so religious and having this kid just turn up and tell him all of these things that happened in his own son's life and saying that's his life. So he decided to keep him in the cage. Now, I love the polar opposites we have here, with the different Henrys being called the devil and being locked in a cage. Both of them seem to be hailed as the same thing in each different timeline. So is either of them actually evil? Maybe the horrible things and the powers that they both have are not really to do with their characters. Maybe it's just like a fracture in the dimensions of the universe with what's happened with them two crossing over. It's completely fucked up the universe, and it's doing all these horrible things to kill all these people to sort of like course correct the future. So the police arrive at the house to find the young Henry in the basement after new Henry finds him down there, and he's been down there for 27 years, one would guess, but he hasn't aged, just like Bill Skarsgård's character. So luckily for the original timeline version of Henry, he's forgotten all these memories, because what we find out is that he's actually been down there for 27 years living with Matthew Deaver, who's been celebrating Christmas with him and being tempted to let him out, but he just hasn't done it. So he's, in a way, he's probably best off not knowing what happened over all of those years. The confusing thing is that once he was brought back to his original timeline, he began to age again. So would that be apply for the same for Bill Skarsgård's character? If he was returned home, would he start to age naturally again? One of the police officers comes to Henry's house is the officer from the Shawshank prison, who was a guard in the prison. I keep forgetting his name. I think I'm going to call him Dennis. I can't remember his name, if it was Dennis or not. So in this timeline, he's actually a police officer, and he's a lot more stern, a lot more confident, and he seems to be at least a little bit more happy with his life compared to what he was like in Shawshank. And with these two timelines bleeding over and certain events being like polar opposites and the same sort of thing but in a different way, I was kind of expecting this character to somehow go on a rampage in this universe too and kill a lot of people. In one of the tapes, Matthew talks about the bad patch, one horrible spring where a lot of bad things happen. Now I'm not sure what this alludes to, if this is events from a certain book, or I'm not really sure what this really relates to. If you have any idea what this bad patch, this horrible spring is, then let me know. With Matthew keeping the young Henry in the basement for all those years, 27 years plus, we figure out that that's how he learned how to carve the soap characters, because he learned that from his dad, just like Bill Skarsgård's character learned it from his dad 27 years prior. So they both have the same skills, and that's why they both had these figures and the knowledge to make those soap figures. So after Molly and Henry discover all of this information, they decide they want to go and see the young Henry Deaver, who's being held in police custody at the moment. And when they arrive at the police station, there's cops and fire engine all heading there already, and what seems to have happened is something similar to what happened at Juniper Hills with Nick or Henry Deaver in the other timeline, where he got inmates to just set fires. Molly and Henry interrogate the other Henry to find out who he is and who he's telling the truth, and they figure out that he is telling the truth, and this all happens when Molly touches him. So she definitely has some kind of shining in this, and she touches him and she gets a flash to the complete other timeline, so she knows that he's telling the truth and she knows what happened with him in the woods. So they decide that they should probably try and get him out of this situation with the police, because they want to lock him up for good, thinking that he'd set this fire, and they know different, so they want to get him out of the jail cell and to just help him out. Now this is where one of the really cool scenes in the episode starts, is where they somehow get him into their own custody, and instead of taking him to a house, they get towards the woods, and Molly decides that she needs to take him to the woods because she's seen all of these things and he needs to get there, probably for the benefit of everyone. So we get to a train crossroads and they're both parked up and they're being followed by Dennis, and he is watching them. He's keeping an eagle eye on them in case they try and do anything. And this is where we see one of the most visually appealing shots of the episode. I think it's where we see the trains and we see the red lights of the crossroads, and every time they look into the woods to see if they're going to make the decision to go, it just looks so like gloomy, and the lighting looks really cool. And I just loved the way they shot that, because it was like inviting them in, but at the same time it looked like a really bad place you did not want to go to. And of course they run the lights, just make it past. Now this is where the episode gets really, really trippy now, and I really like the direction they went with this. As Henry runs ahead into the deep forest, he stops at a point and the schism happens, and he sees a different timeline or different time frame, and what he sees is this really old, like fashioned dress woman from like the 1400s. I'm assuming that's from when it is, because they brought that up earlier in the episode, and she's the woman that we've seen in Molly's dream sequences, which is the woman holding the bloody knife. We don't know why she's out there. We don't know if she's just someone with a similar ability to Henry, but I thought it was really cool. It seems this one place in time of Castle Rock brings all of these people with the powers into this part of the woods to try and sort out this rift or this fracture in time. When Molly touches him, she appears in the schism as well, so she can see everything that Henry's seeing. And we see like inmates running from Shawshank with like dogs chasing them, and that's obviously in like the 30s or 40s. And then there's like a more modern day shot of some woman, she's stood out by a tree like cutting her wrist. I'm not sure how she relates to it. Maybe she just has the schism and she wants to get it over with because she's had enough with her voices. And I think one of the most important things in this is with the woman in the 1400s is there's so many like birds in the sky, and we've seen in the earlier episodes where all the birds start doing like a kamikaze, they just started killing themselves, and what we see is that there's like this really red sun in the sky, and I think what it's trying to tell us is that there is some kind of end of the world apocalypse situation which is happening because of all of the things that are happening with the schisma and all of the fractures in the timelines. So I think that they need to fix all of this, or that's what's going to happen. It's obviously almost happened, or did happen, in that scenario with the girl with the knife. So this is what I think Henry's purpose is, and Ruth's purpose is trying to change this timeline to stop this from happening, which is probably what next episode is going to focus on. As they're running through the woods, Henry's chasing the young girl and Molly's chasing as well. At the same time, we're getting a flip to the modern day where Henry and the cop are chasing them too. So we get seeing like night and day in all these different timelines, and it's really cool. It's really well edited, and this is where Molly gets shot. And this is obviously what she's seen in the last episode. This is not a vision of her, it's a vision of her alternative self who is now dead, we can assume. As Henry's holding Molly in his arms, he enters the schisma and enters the modern day, which is the 1991 timeline, and he appears over the cliff edge, and he sees young Henry being saved by Alan Pangborn, and he is standing on the cliff edge. And I'm pretty sure in the first episode, when we were getting this image of the cliff edge from behind Henry, we heard all these weird creepy noises in the schisma, so we can probably assume that the characters from different timelines is what's creating this noise, this rift, this thing in people's ears. So it's a lot to get our heads around, especially I've just watched the episode, I've not watched it back. I'm definitely gonna have to try and watch the whole show again before the next episode. And I really love the scene with Henry just like staggering through the woods, and that the music was really cool, and he just seemed like oblivious to where he was. He was just walking around in 1991 in the snow, whereas he was just in like the nighttime in standard weather in 2018. Overall, I thought this episode was great, and I'm really glad that they focused on this character of the Bill Skarsgård's Henry, instead of just having it being like the normal Henry just telling us the events that had happened. I'm so glad we got a whole episode focused on it. It was very Fringe, if you've seen the show Fringe, heavily influenced by that, I'm gonna guess, which is also J.J. Abrams. Now all we've got to do really is theorise where the show is going in the next episode. I definitely think there's going to be some kind of end of the world apocalypse thing, which is why all of these horrible things that are happening are getting worse and worse, and that's probably what the bad spring was. Maybe it was getting close to the apocalypse. I'm not quite sure what it is that stops these events from getting too bad before the apocalypse, but it seems like it's happening again, and it's probably going to happen in the next episode if someone doesn't do anything to save it. There's probably a ton I've missed. Like I said, I've just finished watching the episode, but I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know your theories down below, let me know your thoughts. If this is your first time checking out my channel, then go ahead and hit that subscribe, press that like button, and just leave a comment, because it really does help me out, especially after I've left it so late for this episode to go out. Thank you all for watching, and I guess I will see you with the finale next week, and then what are we going to do with our lives?